Hi, I'm Dawn Damari, and you're listening to and watching another episode of a Teaspoon of Healing podcast. Today, I am happy to introduce my guest, David Vito Gregoli. Vito is a
Hello.
producer. Oh, hi. Vito is a producer, composer, artist, and multi-instrumentalist. How are you doing today, Vito?
I'm doing great. Happy to be talking to you.
Happy to have you here on the podcast. So, before I ask you about your background and when you started playing music, I wanted to ask what your thoughts are about this. So, music has often been described as something that is very healing to people, and a lot of people find healing through music. So, what are your thoughts on that? And have you had any experiences with this in your life?
I would say that's a very deep subject. And for me, healing in music, they go on different levels. There's been a lot of scientific studies about how vibrations affect people on a
Mhm.
neurological and emotional level. But I think for music, most music, most music that people consume is popular music, whether you're listening to country or hip hop or Frank Sinatra. It's all, basically pop music. And the thing about that is that can also be healing. I do a lot of new age music, so you get into the drone aspect of things and how that, you know, um, affects you in different frequencies. That aside, what really affects people the most is just what comes from here. What reaches here actually. So if you're
Mhm.
listening to a song and you have an emotional connection to it vis-a-vis where you first heard it, is it a song that you grew up with, you listened to in high school? Is it a song that is connected to a broken heart or maybe the passing of a loved one? So it really is about how it hits your heart, and it has nothing to do with the actual music in a sense because of what I just described. It's about your experience with the music. A lot of people have a love to hear Hotel California, but it's really kind of a
Yes,
downer lyric.
it is.
You know?
Yes, you're right. You're right.
It's very cynical, Don Henley stuff, which is great, but people love to listen to it. But I think, for me, 50% of the song's appeal is the great guitar solo at the end, which
Mhm.
is very iconic. Same thing with Stairway to Heaven. Why do people love that song so much? It's not the lyric. You know, it's
It's
how
true.
it feels to you when you heard it, where you heard it, who you heard it with. So it's a very experiential thing. So the healing comes from whatever salve that it generates from your own personal experience. So when people ask me, well, tell me about this tune, whether it's a song with lyrics or an instrumental song, a lot of the times it'll have nothing to do with how they encapsulate it into their lives. There's a cool live version of a song by Alex DeGrassi, instrumental song, and he said people have played this for weddings and at births and all kinds of occasions. And he said it's really just about a trip to Philadelphia, something
That's
totally
interesting.
insane. And when I
Yes.
hear it, I don't hear any of those things. I hear something completely different. So that's the beauty of music. It's not just me putting music out there, it's how you receive it,
Mhm.
how you bring your own personality into it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I really liked that. I really liked too when you described the Hotel California, Stairway to Heaven. That way, it just resonates with so many people. But for example, Hotel California, it's actually the lyrics are downer. It's a downer lyrics, right?
Yeah.
Those are downer lyrics, but the
I mean, think
guitar,
about it, and she's buying a Stairway to Heaven.
yeah,
That's
that's
not a
what.
really uplifting
No, it
song.
is not. It's not. But wow, resonates with so many people. So yeah, it's a like you said, it's from the heart, where how it hits within the heart. Well, thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to ask you that 'cause you are actually my first musical guest on A Teaspoon of Healing. I used to have a music show. It's called The Groove Express. It was a while back on a radio station. So I'm trying to bring some musical guests onto this podcast. So I'm very happy that you're here.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah. So Vito, uh, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background with the people listening or watching?
Well, it is classified.
Well,
No, it's
whatever is safe
quite
to
not
release.
classified. I was born and raised in LA, to a family that was involved with the movie and TV business. So I've been exposed to that literally from day one. My mother was an actor. My grandfather built sets. My sister became an actor. So that was the milieu I grew up in. But I fell in love with music, and my grandfather bought me a little transistor radio about this big in 1965, and I put it to my ear, and it stayed there for a good 3 or 4 years without leaving my ear. It was just obsessive. And I got interested in drums when I was 6 when I saw the Monkees on
Wow.
TV, and then the Beatles, and gradually moved into other types of music, progressive rock, hard rock, classical music, jazz. Um, the school I grew up in had a really good lineage of musicians. Tom Scott was a number of years ahead of us. Um, but the main thing about where I grew up was the guys from the band Toto, who were the top
Mhm.
session players, all went to my high school,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was able to see them play our homecoming dance when I first got into high school, and was like, what?
Wow.
Because they were so amazing. And so, that changed my trajectory in a certain sense, because I became interested more in studio work and production, not just playing and songwriting, and composing. And then I went to college, got a degree in music, which was super fun. And then I launched myself back into the rock and roll world, even though I was gigging the whole time I was going to school, which was kind of crazy. Um, but started playing with original bands in the 80s, and some of them almost got signed. The 80s subsided, we came into the 90s, and I started working with a lot of singer-songwriters, and they all needed musical directors in a sense. So I, by default, became that, and started recording, and that's how I started getting into production. But when I think about it, I was always the guy in the band, even in high school, who's telling everybody what to do, which didn't go over well at first because I didn't have very much skill in how to communicate it. Gradually, I learned, and in '98, I moved to Seattle because just I'd had enough of LA after what was it, almost 40 years. So we moved up there, and we got divorced kind of pretty quickly, very amicably.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized that I had not established enough connections up there to make a living. And it was a very close-knit community, and they didn't
Mhm.
like annoying people from LA coming up and stealing
Yeah.
their gigs, understandably. So I moved back here, and I decided, I'm going to do everything different, because one of the reasons I left was I was just burnt out on gigs and trying to make a living, and and the whole sticky music thing, for want of a
Mhm.
better word. And so I decided I'm going to start making albums that I want to make, writing stuff that I want to make. So I started a record label just solely
Oh.
to get stuff out there. This is before Spotify, before Pandora,
Mhm.
before streaming existed. We were still in the CD world.
Mhm.
And basically, it was the Wild West out there. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and everybody was trying to readjust to the new gravity of this new world that was emerging in the music business. So I started the record label. First CD I recorded was an album of Tibetan chants by a female lama who I'd known
Oh.
from Seattle. So it was the sacred text chanted very organically, as it would have been done for thousands of years. And that was really fun. And then singer-songwriters eventually released a couple of instrumental albums, one Latin guitar um, album, and then a new age ambient album, then a jazz album, kind of a world jazz fusion album. And all this time, I'm producing artists both in the world new age singer-songwriter categories, a classical album. I mean, uh, just a lot of different things, and kind of gradually found my groove. And as things shifted, I shifted, learning to deal with the streaming world, which is a lot less lucrative than selling CDs was 20 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's really been about shifting. I mean, from the very first gig I did up to now, there's been so many shifts in how you can monetize music. And right now we're
Yes.
at a point where we're being under monetized,
Mhm.
and we're being
Mhm.
threatened with AI.
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we monetize in the future with this new environment that we're in? So I believe, looking back, and I'm kind of been an amateur historian since I was a little kid. You can see patterns, and you can see how did this come about. It was something we couldn't predict, didn't expect, and no one had a clue. Now, of course, there are people who did have a clue who are smarter than me, but on the general populace, that's how it was. Is this CD thing going to really fly? What's the streaming thing? I mean, Napster affected all of us. I forgot to mention
Mhm.
that, but everybody
Oh,
knows that
yes.
story, I guess.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yes.
what's coming next is something we can't see because we can't see around the corner.
Mhm.
But as we
Mhm.
start to turn around the corner, you got to keep your eyes peeled because it's going to make itself evident. And the musicians, the composers, the music industry people who can jump on that will be the ones who, you know, gain the most out of it, both artistically and monetarily. So that
Yes.
brings us up to today. Actually, it brings us up to tomorrow. So there you go.
Yes, for sure. That's a really good thing that that's a really good point that you brought up there, the AI with music. I mean, it's affecting so many things, writing, art, and also music. It sounds scary, but like you said, people that can kind of jump on it and kind of can see around the corner, that's the ones that are going to excel and do better, and not to try not to be afraid.
And another thing about AI is I was talking to my distributor last year about, hey, I think I'll do some lo-fi mixes of some of these songs. He said, don't bother. It's dead. Lo-fi is dead for artists because the
Okay.
companies like Spotify are doing their own AI music.
Hmm.
And I took my partner out for her birthday a couple of weeks ago, and we're at the restaurant. They were playing lo-fi beats, and I could tell they were AI.
Wow.
So it's like
Okay.
that's one less avenue of
Oh no.
income for creators.
You see, that's the thing. What I still feel that it's kind of going off topic, but I still feel that a lot of the music consumers like me, we want to hear music that's created by people. It comes like you said at the beginning, it comes from the heart. And that's what's missing in AI. Sure, I mean, I guess you could say it has a heart, but it's not because they
It's not a
machines don't
human
have
heart.
hearts. No, exactly. So the people out there, we still want to hear music. Now, from people now, who knows, the youngest generations, the ones that are, maybe under 10 years old, when they grow up, who knows what they're gonna want, right? But,
Well, I think people
yeah.
always resonate to something that comes from the heart. And when I talk
Yes.
to the artists I'm working with, and something that I learned along the way is that what people can connect to is real honest heart. Whether
Mhm.
you're, somebody flamboyant like David Bowie or somebody intimate like James Taylor,
Mhm.
um, it's what connects to people. And so if you don't have that as an artist, you might as well be AI.
Yes.
There's a lot
That's
of
true.
criticism towards popular music right now because it seems fairly antiseptic.
Mhm.
And, the kids growing up now are getting that antiseptic thing. But you find when you talk to them about other music, hey, have you heard this artist or that artist, that they actually resonate with because they don't know what they're missing because they've never had
Mhm.
it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely, and even the young kids. It's interesting you bring that up because my son he's 16, and yes, to fulfill his art requirement at school, he's gonna take a class online with the community college of the history of rock and roll. So, and he's really into hip hop. He's really into hip hop right now, but he's gonna be finally like learning the history of rock and roll. And I'm actually really excited that he's learning that. So he's gonna connect with some of these, heart-based music. Not that hip hop, a lot of it can come from the heart too, but rock and roll, which is he always. I almost thought that he was always saying was passe in a way, and I said it is not. But it was just funny when he said it. But and of course, hip
the
hop
thing
can come
about
from the
hip
heart.
hop, the thing about hip hop is, and a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but I believe hip hop should be in the spoken word category
Oh
because it's
yeah, I
about the
see that.
words. It's not about, I
Yes.
mean, the groove is nice, but it has
Yes.
nothing to do really with the main message, which is what they're rapping about.
Mhm. Yeah, I
you know.
like that. It's interesting.
I went
So
to the Grammy Academy last week to see some spoken word artists,
mhm.
and a lot of them had music behind them, and it was like, oh, this is really cool. This is like the beat poets
Yeah.
in the late 50s, early 60s, like Allen Ginsberg. So
Yes.
anyway, so that's the lineage really of rap.
Yes,
And
it
the more
is.
they connect, the more sophisticated rap will get. And, who knows where it will
Absolutely.
end up. Anyway, that
Absolutely.
was
Yes, and
a
there's definitely a lot of heart
tangent.
and soul in that. Yeah, for sure. Now, when you mention, you had mentioned before that you kind of got into also doing new age music, and I was reading your bio. So said that you were introduced to transcendental meditation at 13 and some meditation and practices and yoga. So yeah, when maybe talk a little bit about yeah how you were introduced to some of these spiritual practices and how it affected your music.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mother's best friend was a TM teacher. And when I was 13, she kind of introduced us to the whole process. And we all got involved with it for a little while. And I was really the only one of the three of us, my sister and my mother and I, who maintained it because I realized that it really connected with me. And I realized much later, after many years of studying Hinduism and Buddhism and other things, um, that all the music that I really loved as a young kid was stuff that connected to here,
Hmm.
but it was also connected to here.
Hmm.
Whatever you determine the divine to be, I'm pretty much an atheist, but there is something that we connect with. It's
Right.
undeniable. And when I look back at the stuff that I resonated with over the years, it's the stuff that makes you feel connected to that. And that's the kind of things I started to want to create myself, whether it's in the pop genre or in the new age genre. It's the things that elevate the spirit.
I love
And that
that.
makes me feel good. So hopefully it makes other people feel good when they hear it.
I love that. I love that. Now, why don't we play one of your? So I usually say songs, but it probably is pieces. But I'll probably use either term because you're also a songwriter. So
The other song, On the Road to Windham,
yes, let's do that one then.
is very much a dedication to the new age music that really moved me from like the early 80s with Windham Hill Records, Will
Okay.
Ackerman, Michael Hedges, George Winston. So when Jim Kimo West and I, who's a marvelous slack key guitar player, say that three times fast, who also plays with Weird Al Yankovic, um,
Oh,
and I
wow.
decided to do an album. I thought it'd be really fun to do kind of a homage to the whole Windham Hill catalog. So we picked elements like I play fretless bass, I have 12 strings and mandolins and all kinds of things on it to kind of, not just tip our hat, but just trying to continue that legacy of really beautiful music that really I find very moving.
Wonderful. Okay, well, then let's listen to that one. So this one is called On the Road to Windham. Oh, wow. That was really beautiful. I really liked that. I really liked that. And yeah, when did you release that one?
That came out last May.
Oh,
Our
okay. So it's
second
not.
album is coming out this June.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
it's like Jim is also like me, very prolific, very not genre specific. So we always add different elements. But the prolificness got a hold of us really quickly. So we ended up finishing half the album last fall, and the rest of it this winter. It just came very fast. So we actually have it done, and we're just waiting till June because you have to have a certain amount of time between releases, I think.
Mhm.
So I think probably could easily have made it a triple album in terms of
Oh, nice.
creativity. And we send each other ideas back and forth, and there's just so many of them that are so fun to work with. And, you know,
That's really cool. Yeah, I really liked it. It was really, really pretty. And yeah, that's really cool. And so that one came out last May. And so we will play another one at the end of this, but I also saw that reading your bio, so there's that spiritual text, the Bhagavad Gita, that you had brought that to the world as an album and also as a rock opera.
yeah, that was an amazing project. Someone who I'd worked with before in the past, who's fundamentally a lyricist and author. She's written a number of books on Ayurveda. Approached me about doing a translation, English translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and we found out that no one's actually done that before.
Oh, really?
But the idea was to do it in the pop realm, not to do it, trying to be Indian about it. Obviously,
Hmm.
neither her and I are Indian.
Hmm.
Um, but we got Indian American singer
Oh, nice.
Deepak Ramapriyam to sing the part of Krishna. And we have a number of Indian musicians from Delhi and a few Indian American ones from here in the United States. Um, and the most challenging thing about it was I decided all the song. First of all, there are 18 chapters of the Gita, so
Okay.
that meant it was going to be 18 songs or pieces.
Hmm.
Um, and that was a little bit intimidating because that's, you're writing a
That's a
double
big.
album
Hmm.
and they're all coming from me. I'm not collaborating with anybody on the music. It's all coming out of me. So I hadn't written that many songs in a row in decades. So it was really super challenging, but also very easy to get back into that milieu. But I made a rule for myself that they all had to be based on Indian ragas, which are I don't want to call them scales or melodies, but they're kind of somewhere in between. But they have a lot of rules to them. It's very the Indian North Indian tradition is very deep, and I don't pretend to be anywhere near an expert on it. But so all 18 songs have different ragas that they're based on, and I had to work the melody of those songs into those ragas, which was super difficult.
Sounds like it.
And but I think it came out really good, and it was super fun to do, and I got to play most of the instruments myself, so that's always fun. It's like just walking into a playground and just going from the swings to the monkey bars and all over.
And it sounds like you know quite a few instruments. So, yeah, can you talk about what are some of your favorite ones to play?
Well, the one I always connect with is, and you'll see that behind me, is drums, because that's my
I
first
see that.
instrument I started as a kid. And even though I didn't continue with it, because it's hard to have a drum set in an apartment building. The
That's for
neighbors
sure.
don't really appreciate it too
No, they
much.
don't.
I don't know
They don't.
why. So I switched to bass, and then I can't even remember the reason I switched to guitar not too long after that. And I had to learn keyboards, piano for school. I started taking music classes in high school, and I was also really into the band Traffic, so I learned flute.
Mhm. Oh,
And
nice.
I've always wanted to play sitar, so I finally started doing that. It's
Cool.
been many, many years of feeling like a beginner.
Hmm.
But the more I use it, the more I record with it, the better I get because you kind of have to. And I just
Hmm.
collect instruments after that from different parts of the world because it's just so much fun making the sounds. And people go, well, how do you play so many instruments? I go, well, I really only play one instrument. That's music. It's
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
what are the mechanics of it? In the 90s or 80s, I can't remember which, I started to play saxophone. And because
Okay.
the fingering's very similar to the flute, I got pretty far in the 3 months that I was doing it, but I hit a wall realizing that I would have to be doing this really seriously every single day, which means all this other creative stuff I was doing would have to be put aside. But aside from that, most string instruments are pretty similar. Most percussion instruments are pretty similar. It's just how do you make a tone? Okay. How do you make a pitch? Okay. And then you insert your musicality that you spent years and years and years developing into that. And the next thing you know, you're playing an instrument you've never played. So it's not, I don't
Awesome.
think it's that complicated. I mean, obviously, I don't play a violin because that is so different from what I do.
Mhm.
But
No,
anyway,
well, it sounds complicated to me because I don't know how to play any instruments. I did learn piano when I was very young, but I've always been into music, but not I've never really, unfortunately, learned, how to play. So, it was interesting
there's
how you
still
said
time.
I know,
There's still
huh? That's
time.
right. There's a lot
And
like
and
yeah,
I want to say this to everybody. Do not be intimidated by the fact at the beginning it's hard because everything is. You
true.
try to I can't put a basketball through a hoop, but if I practiced, I would learn how to do
Mhm.
it. It's just a matter of putting the time in and not getting discouraged when you can't do it
Well, thanks for
because
saying that.
that's life. I mean, that's how we do anything. Whatever business you're in, whether it's in an office or, flying a plane or whatever, you have to put the time in to get
Mhm.
beyond the learning curve.
Yes.
All right,
Well,
that's
that's
my
good that you
spiel
said
to
that.
young people.
Yeah, that's good that you said that, too, especially for younger people that are starting out, but people at any age can learn an instrument.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yes, and even though and I liked how you said this, a lot of them are similar, but then when you were going you don't know the violin, that is so different than a lot of the other instruments that you play.
Yeah, but there's
Mhm.
uh, there's an instrument I learned not very well, but an instrument from Bengal called an esraj. It's got the
Okay.
neck of a sitar, which I thought, oh, that's going to be make it easier, but you have to bow it like a cello.
Oh. Oh, wow.
So my
Interesting.
ex-girlfriend had a cello at one point, and I pulled it out and I just started playing it because I was using the same
Oh,
technique
okay.
that I learned from the esraj on it, and she got really pissed and didn't let me play it anymore.
It's like, "No, please don't." That is really, really cool.
But
Well,
to really play the cello, I'd have to put a lot of time into it because it is a different technique than esraj or anything else that I've done.
yeah, cello, yeah, cello, a lot of those string instruments, I guess that's what they call them, right? The strings,
Yeah.
violin, cello. Yeah, those ones seem like they'd be really hard, and I know learning violin, they always make a joke when you're learning how to do it, I forgot what it says, there was some like, it sounds like, a dying animal or something when you're first learning the
It's
violin.
it's like someone's torturing a cat is what they
Yes,
usually
yeah,
say.
okay, that's what it was, yes. And, yeah, we had a neighbor, nearby that their child was learning violin, and that's what it sounded like. I said, "What's going on over there?" And that's what it was. It's hilarious, but
I would wish
ah.
that on nobody, but it's worth it. Once you get through that period, then you're making music.
That's true. That's true. I really liked that what you had said too about for young people. Yeah, what advice would you give to young people who are starting out in music, whether it's in rock and roll, hip hop, or even in new age music?
I'd say, why are you doing it?
Mhm,
I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, but you have to establish what your motivation is, you know? Do
mhm.
you want to just make music because you can't help but make music? Great. It doesn't have to be your profession. I wouldn't recommend it, especially these days.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, it's easier than ever to get your music out there through all these streaming services. So
true.
if you have something that you want to say musically, whether anybody else needs to hear it is irrelevant. Do you need to express yourself? And these days, it's harder and harder for people to express themselves in so many ways. So I think it's really good for people who have any musical ambitions. Don't cut corners and get this program that will write chord changes for you. Okay. Learn about it and
Mhm.
you'll find better ways to express yourself when you can do it yourself. I
Yeah.
just think it's great. And, when people talk to me, like, my friend's young son, he's young, he's 19 now, but I've known him since he was like 10. Uh, he learned guitar and now he's learning production, and, he's starting to figure out what he wants to do with his life. And at first he started becoming a music major at Santa Monica College. And then I heard he just switched his major to business. I went,
Mhm.
good idea. Your chances of getting a secure life and then spending your free time making music. I have a
Mhm.
number of colleagues especially in the new age world, who have spent their life making money, and then they decided, I'm going to retire early and become a full-time musician. And they've done very well for themselves. They live a nice life. They're not, you know, scratching for pennies like most
Mhm.
musicians are.
Yeah.
It's a tough world out there. So if and right now you have the ability, not to go on and on, but you have the ability
Okay.
now to be a touring performing musician, or like myself, just be someone who creates music and puts it out into the world. Because a lot of the music I make isn't really repeatable. We did, Jim Kimo West and I, he had another album coming out with somebody else, and we hijacked that gig to play a few songs of ours. And it's not the same. The performance is not the same. You're not like the Eagles going out and playing, Take It Easy the same way you heard it on the radio, because of the nature of a lot of this music, whether it's electronic or acoustic. A lot of it is not really repeatable. You can do a kind of a facsimile of it, but it's not going to be what you heard on the record. So I find, for me, it's not something I'm interested in doing, although I love performing, you know.
Yes. Yes, that's really cool, and I appreciate that advice being put out to people, even though, yeah, it's a little bit, reality too,
Yeah.
for sure. But and like what we had discussed earlier, where it's going with AI and stuff too, the future, yeah, it can be a little bit murky as far as
Yeah.
somebody wanting to become a musician, but I still appreciate that. Now, before we play uh, one last piece of yours, so this you said you have a another album coming out in June. Let's talk about that a little bit before we play
Okay,
one of
the
these.
album coming out in June was with Jim Kimo West, the guitar player. I have an
Mhm.
album coming out in July
Oh,
with
okay.
the percussionist, composer, multi-instrumentalist Jim Gelcer. So
Okay.
last year, when Jim Gelcer and I were releasing singles, I called it the Summer of Jims, because I was constantly releasing a song with, or an album with, one of them. So we're continuing that summer theme. So June is Jim Kimo West, July is Jim Gelcer. Jim Gelcer and I have been releasing singles at least once a month since last year. So the final two singles are coming out. The first one, Hope, is coming out on Friday, the 25th. A month later, the last song on the album, Healing, is coming out. That's a new age ambient neoclassical album. So I think everybody will kind of enjoy hearing it, I hope.
Oh, yes, that sounds wonderful. So as you said, so there's one in June and then also one in July. So we'll be looking out for those for sure.
Yes.
That's really cool. Okay, well, I wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been really nice having you as a guest. I've really enjoyed this. And yeah, really appreciated all your advice to young musicians. So I wanted to end this by playing the song Hope, as song or piece, as we call it. I usually still just call them songs. So by playing the song Hope, and before I play it, would you mind talking about it a little bit?
When Jim Gelser and I decided to make this album, we wanted it to be very healing. So we called it Quiet Expanse. And it's meant to be a series of albums, very much like the Liquid Minds series that Chuck Wild does, which we've admired over the last, I think he's been doing it for about 20, 30 years right now. So we wanted to be the very healing music. So each of the pieces is named after a quality that we admire or aspire to: authenticity, compassion, resilience, and hope is the one we're going to hear. And the one following them a month later will be called Healing. And then the album Quiet Expanse is coming out in July.
Nice. So this one is called Hope. And so you said this one is recorded. This one is by you, Vito Gregoli, and then it's one of the Jims, correct?
Jim Gelcer, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that one. So, again, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'll say this now, and we will end with the song "Hope." So, again, thank you, Vito, for coming on the show. I've really, really enjoyed this, and
Me too.
I wish you the best. And I'm gonna check out all your music. I followed your YouTube as well, so people can
Oh,
check that
great.
out. I'll put the links in my show notes so then people can then keep up with all what you're doing, which is a lot. So, so thank you again, Vito, for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed it.
Me
And
too.
oh, thank you. And so now we will hear one of the new songs, Hope. And this is by Jim Gelcer and David Vito Gregoli.
Excellent. Thank you.